Hey friends, it's Laura, welcome back. If you clicked on this video, you probably have an alocasia in your care. Maybe you just bought one at the store, brought it home, and have no idea what you're doing, or maybe you've had one or a few for a while and you just wanna up your care game. That is what I'm gonna be talking about today. I'm gonna talk about lighting, feeding, watering, all the basics for alocasia care, and I'm also gonna share my personal hack or care tip that I really credit with keeping my alocasias alive and thriving. That'll be at the end. So if you're interested in all the alocasia care tips, stay tuned. I'm gonna start off by talking about lighting because I would say lighting is one of the most important elements to get correct when growing alocasia. Alocasia love bright, indirect light. Now, what does that mean? It means that your alocasia should be close enough to a window where it can see sunlight for at least 6 hours. More is great, but at least 6 hours of indirect bright light is gonna keep your alocasia alive and thriving. If you don't have a bright enough window, you should invest in grow lights. I live in Canada and I do not get enough bright indirect light during the winter, so I do use grow lights for all of my alocasia. They love it. And I can also control how much light they get. I actually give these guys 8 to 12 hours of bright indirect light through my grow lights, and they love it. They continue growing through the winter. If you are depending on natural sunlight, it is important to know that in the winter, alocasia will often go dormant. That is a normal reaction to the change in seasons and less light. When they go dormant, it could mean that they just stop growing, stop putting out leaves. It could also mean that they lose a significant amount of leaves. If you suspect that your alocasia has gone dormant because of lack of growth, check the stem. If the stem is still firm and not squishy, it means that your alocasia is still alive, it is going through a dormancy period, and it will come back once it starts receiving more light. This has happened to me before, and I thought my alocasia was dead. I put it in the compost, and since then I have learned about dormancy. If you're using grow lights for your alocasia probably won't even know that it is winter outside, and dormancy is less of a risk. However, it can still happen. Watering is another super important element when caring for alocasia. Alocasia love their soil to be moist, but not soggy. That can be a difficult balance to achieve in the beginning, but the more you practice, the easier it will get to know when your alocasia need water. There are a few methods that you can use to double check if your alocasia are thirsty. When caring for your alocasia, you're gonna wanna water them when they are about 50% dry. You can check the moisture of your soil by just sticking your finger into the soil and seeing how far down it has dried out. If it is more than 50% dry, it is time to water. You can also use a chopstick or skewer to check the moisture. You carefully stick it into the soil and see how far down the wet soil seems to be. Another easy and more foolproof way to check the moisture in your soil is to use a moisture meter. You just stick this into the soil of your plant and it will tell you how dry the soil is. As you can see, the arrow is at a 1, which means the soil is super, super dry and definitely needs to be watered. This one is not completely dry, but I like to water alocasia whenever the arrow is below 2, so we're gonna water this one as well. This one seemed quite wet when I stuck the skewer in, and it's out at about a 3, so we're gonna let this one be today, water it next week. I'm gonna talk about fertilizer before I go and water those alocasia because I fertilize my alocasia every single time I water them. I find that alocasia love the nutrients. It helps keep them growing. It helps keep their leaves really big. The one exception to that is if I have an alocasia that goes dormant. When an alocasia goes dormant, it is resting, it is not growing, it does not need that extra food, and extra fertilizer can actually damage the root system of the plant if it doesn't need those nutrients at the time. I personally like to use a more natural fertilizer, especially because these plants are in my home. However, everyone does something different. You should do what works for you. I'm gonna go add my fertilizer to my water and then show you how I water my plants. I like to mix it up when it comes to plant food. That way my plants get a range of nutrients every time I water. So I'm adding a drop of liquid fertilizer and I'm also adding this instant plant food, which is a really convenient way to add fertilizer to your water. You just add it to the jar, it foams up, and then your water is ready to go. We're at my kitchen sink here, and before I water, I'm going to talk about another element that is super important to alocasia care, and that is drainage. Drainage refers to both the type of soil you're using and the type of pot you're using. Now, alocasia, as I said, like to be moist, but they don't like to be soggy. So you want to make sure that the soil you use is going to have lots of big chunks in it. That's going to allow the water to flow through freely. As you can see, my soil is super chunky. And the pot needs to have a drainage hole right here. That's going to allow the water to flow out and not pool at the bottom. If you want to keep your alocasia in a decorative pot, like this one I keep in a decorative pot, that's okay. Just keep it in a nursery pot with drainage, and that way when you water it, you can just take it out of the decorative pot and the water will be able to flow freely out of the pot and not pool at the bottom. When I water, I like to water quite thoroughly. That way all of the root system gets a little bit of water, and once it starts flowing out the bottom, I stop watering. So same with this guy, we're gonna water it really thoroughly so that all of the roots get water. And then we're gonna let it drain a little bit to make sure all of the excess water has come out the bottom. The last element of care for alocasia that I'm gonna talk about before I give you my super special hack is pest prevention. Alocasia, unfortunately, are quite susceptible to pest infestations. I have found the best way to prevent these is to keep the leaves clean. There are lots of ways to clean your plant's leaves. Find a method that works for you and that you actually enjoy doing. Otherwise, it's gonna feel like a chore and you are not gonna keep up with it. Keeping alocasia leaves clean is the key to preventing pests. And as an added bonus, removing dust and debris from your plant leaves is going to enable your plant to absorb more light, which means your plant is gonna have more energy to grow and thrive. Now, the simplest way to clean your plant's leaves is to just use a wet cloth and to go in there and clean them as well as you can. They will look nice and shiny, and you're gonna remove all of the dust. If you want an extra layer of pest prevention, I recommend using a foliar spray. There are lots of options out there. And this foliar spray came with these plant cleaning gloves, which are basically like fuzzy cloths for your hands to make the cleaning of your plant more enjoyable and easier. So you're just gonna spray that onto your leaf. And foliar sprays usually contain a mixture of water, soaps, and special oils that are going to help prevent pest outbreaks. When you are cleaning the leaves, you want to make sure you are being very gentle. You don't want to rip your leaves. You're not scrubbing the leaves. You are just cleaning them as well as possible. And if your plant has quite a bit of texture, like this Alocasia black velvet, you're going to want to make sure you get into all those crevices and nooks and crannies, because that is where pests like to hide. I also find that when I clean my leaves, it's a really good opportunity to look for signs of potential pest infestations. So I'm looking for any new strange markings, any leaf damage, any webbing, any bug poo, any dust that moves when I touch it, because those are the telltale signs of plant pests. Now that my Alocasia's leaves are clean and shiny and they've been watered and fed, I can now share with you my special tip for keeping my Alocasias alive and thriving. And that is, I place my Alocasias in really prominent, noticeable areas in my home. Alocasias require more water than most of the plants in my collection, so if they are somewhere where my eye is naturally drawn to, I'm gonna remember to water them. And if I do forget and they start to droop, I'm going to water them right away, instead of having them hidden away in a corner and I might not even notice that they're dry until it's too late. This also allows me to notice any pest infestations before they become out of control. As I said, Alocasias are more susceptible to pest infestations, so if you're putting them somewhere really noticeable, you're gonna see that problem before it becomes unmanageable. And that is my special tip. All right, friends, that is all from me for today. I hope you found this information helpful. If you did, consider subscribing by clicking that subscribe button below. I hope your Alocasias continue to grow and thrive, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.